Good, good day. All right. Welcome to welcome to Respond and Recover for our Free Union High School District number 216. Good morning, Superintendent Dr. Runyon, Chief Information Officer, and Risk Management Compliance Officer. Thank you for having me here today to briefly review the NIST cybersecurity framework and how our Free Union High School District can respond and recover from a cybersecurity threat to our school district's information communication systems. In addition, by the end of this presentation, my hope is that our district and all its stakeholders will be better aware and able to tackle threats and create a plan for responding and recovering from those threats. NIST notes on page 5 that the framework is useful by organizations in any sector or community. What is the NIST cybersecurity framework? Simply is that it is a document much like Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching that we use for evaluating teachers. While the NIST CSF is designed for business stakeholders, which include IT professionals, CISOs, and managers to be aware of cybersecurity risks and how to manage those risks. We know risk isn't unavoidable, but we also know that it's vital to be prepared in the event of a cybersecurity attack. Previously, you participated in a discussion by me about being prepared. CSF will help the district do just that. Think of the CSF as an evaluation instrument. In this slide, I list the core functional categories of NIST CSF framework. Let's get started. With the NIST cybersecurity framework core framework, it's just a snapshot or a layout, or in layman's terms, of what stakeholders should look for in managing cybersecurity risk for our Free Union High School District. And we can use this guiding framework for our needs. The framework core consists of 4 elements: functions, categories, subcategories, and informative references. This visual can be found on page 6, and I will share that link with everyone at the end of this presentation. I've included an example of it on the screen for you. The area that our Free Union High School District stakeholders want to focus on are the functions. And the 4 functions of the framework are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Today, we are simply going to focus on responding and recovering functions. In our next slide, we will look a bit more at the remaining elements of the NIST cybersecurity framework core, categories, subcategories, and informative references. After the functions are listed, the subdivisions, also known as categories, are expressed. NIST explains categories as cybersecurity outcomes closely tied to problematic needs and particular activities. Let's consider for a moment our Free Union's high school district's cybersecurity needs and potential threats, and begin pondering what our outcomes and programmatic needs are. After the categories comes subcategories. These would be your outcomes from management activities or how you can address the threats of information communication technologies. Finally, NIST gives its references, which I have not included here. These are the standards, guidelines, and practices that are in common with critical infrastructure sectors. The image to the right is taken from page 23 of the NIST cybersecurity framework. What I want you to notice is the red and green areas are the abbreviations, function, unique identifier. So the RS and the RC are known as function identification, function unique identifier, which stand for respond and recover. That's in column 1 and 2 respectively. Column 3 is the category unique identifier. And the last column is the category name. In the response function, we have 5 subcategories. And for recover, we have 3 subcategories. Our next few slides will focus on respond and recover. Then we will examine how these may apply to our school district's unique needs. Respond. Respond includes response planning, communication, and analysis. Respond, communicate, analysis. Here I have created a simplified flowchart. It's a simplified version of the CFS categories on pages 41 to 42. What we must understand as a district is the impact cybersecurity threats have on our organization. In other words, we know that school districts are not immune to cybersecurity threats. If I could sum up this respond function, that would be 2 words, basically risk management. Our Freer Union School District is very familiar with risk management. So what is necessary? To look at is the respond function and how that applies to our needs. So a couple of things that we need to ponder. Does the school district have a response plan in place and ready to execute that plan in the event of a cyber threat? Does the personnel know their roles and the order of operation to go through when we do experience a threat? Has personnel been trained on these operations and procedures? How will they report an incident? Can they identify the incident? Is this just left up to IT technicians at each school site, or are administrators trained? What about security patrol officers on each campus? Are they monitoring the cyber landscape on each campus, or are they dedicated just for physical security? Part 2 of the respond function gives 2 more subcategories, mitigation and improvements. Briefly, a couple of things I want to talk about. Mitigation basically of risk is simply the preparation and ongoing strategies to lessen or alleviate the effects of threats on our information security technologies, basically our servers. I have identified our potential vulnerabilities and risks. That includes student privacy, and I do want to add one other thing: teacher data, administrator data, personnel data. These are very vulnerable data to outsiders. And the free use of Google Apps for Education, that's also very likely to be hacked by someone. The school district should be aware that our neighboring state, New Mexico, the Attorney General there in February, according to Osborne, reported that Google is basically sharing student data. They have the potentiality of sharing student data. It's just too open. This threat has clearly not disappeared. Let's consider investigating whether our servers are secure. Test each system carefully for potential vulnerabilities. We need to ask, can students get around secure testing firewalls? So when students are taking a test, can they get around those firewalls? If they can get around the firewall, then that means our systems are not strong enough. Can cyber criminals get into our systems to access private data? That question should be a resounding yes. We have the potential for that to happen. And how will new vulnerabilities be documented? Are we documenting vulnerabilities? Once we consider these questions, it's safe to transition to the improving our response plans and strategies. All right, next. Recover. The recover portion of NIST cybersecurity framework includes three subcategories: planning, improvements, and communications. Our subcategories under recovery, planning, and improvements include executing a recovery plan. The recovery plan should explain lessons learned and recovery strategies updated. Under communications, our focus should include restoring how we communicate to the public through public relations, our reputation, how our school district's reputation is repaired after the incident, and our recovery activities, are they transparent and explained to all internal and external stakeholders, including board members, parents, and those and our donors on the Auburn Free Union Education Foundation. Bray recommends that school district administrators should review technology agreements with vendors and make an assessment whether student data could be breached. And as I stated before, that's highly likely. It is very highly likely. Now this leads us to recovering from an actual event. While we are a small school district, we can learn something from two cities, Atlanta and Baltimore, on the East Coast. As Newcombe stated, these two cities experienced ransomware, and the cyber criminals wanted some money. They wanted some ransom, and so Atlanta and Baltimore, as Newcombe stated in his article, they chose not to fork over the money, and so the result, the implication of them not giving the money to the cyber criminals resulted in both cities having to really from the bottom, from ground zero, to rebuild their entire systems. They could not get into their computer systems, and so this cost Baltimore and Atlanta a lot of money. It also happened in Florida as well. A Florida city experienced this as well, and they had to fork over $500,000. So this is quite alarming. And while our school district is not a city, while the surrounding town is not a city, we need to be aware of these threats. Our Free Union High School District should consider cybersecurity much like large cities to alleviate the cost involved once attacked. Cyber insurance should be a means the school district could use to respond and recover from a cyber crime. So we should look into cyber insurance. But risk management would have to examine the cost of getting such cyber insurance. But keep in mind, ransomware, as Newcombe states, ransomware breaches are on the decline. Not totally eliminated, but are on the decline. All right, let's look at two more things before we come to our conclusion. So, what are the implications? Compton, in his articles, give 4 steps to respond to cybersecurity threats that I believe we could also apply to our situation as a district. First, our Free Union School District should know the risk and options. We need to know our risk. Point blank, no questions asked. We must know our risk. One critical question that Compton offers us is one that we should consider. Do we have agreements in place with qualified cybersecurity firms and a law enforcement and a law firm experience in breach response. We basically we need the experts to come in. Do we have partnerships? Do we have agreements with them? Does the school district have agreements with stakeholders outside the school to help us mitigate risk within our school district? Cybersecurity risk, that is. In addition, let's consider how valuable each element of our school district is to an attacker. These questions should be answered in a joint meeting with teachers, parents, WestMet, that is CTE personnel, district office administrators, site administrators, our principals, and of course a student ambassador. The second concern our school district should be aware of is cybersecurity response not being a linear projection. That means when we respond to a risk, it's not okay, boom, boom, boom. It's not like going like this. It's everywhere. Our the way we respond, it has a lot of twists and turns to it. Two other authors offer a response strategy that our IT department should consider. We need to identify and monitor the threat, contain the incident, recover and rebuild, and prevent future incidents. At each step, I'm going to add this that the school district public relations personnel is communicating what is happening to our information systems, to teachers, to parents, to community stakeholders. Basically, everyone should be aware of what's going on with their district. The third step is risk management personnel should work closely with legal counsel on the school board through the recovery process. We need to be aware of our chain of custody and ensure internal oversight by district risk management staff and IT department staff are following chain of custody protocols. So internal controls should be this way. Risk management personnel at the district should be closely monitoring IT personnel that they're following the chain of custody protocols to prove that we did lose data or we didn't lose certain data. So those things need to be documented and observed. Lastly, Compton recommends that the IT cybersecurity incident response team glean lessons from tabletop exercises. So, in sum, this looks like an actual mock cybersecurity threat. I recommend that this mock threat take place outside of school hours, on school breaks, fall break, winter break, summer break. And Compton also tells us that if our response time to these mock cybersecurity threats is taking so long that it's disrupting our normal school functions and operations, that we should look to shorter frameworks of 15 minutes or less. Finally, I recommend that IT specialists train all staff on trial run cybersecurity incidents and what to do in case of an incident. Remember, our end users, that means anybody sitting in front of a laptop inside the classroom, they are the weakest link to the cybersecurity realm. Let's look at our next step as we close out our meeting today. Respond, recover, reclaim, and execute a response and recovery plan. Before we can respond, recover, and reclaim, we need to have a plan in place. So today we looked at the response and recover functions from NIST cybersecurity framework. And we gathered some questions on how that applies to our school district. As we close out, I'm proposing that we gather a planning committee, a cybersecurity respond and recover planning committee to respond and recover from threats to our school district. Every kid is using a Chromebook. Teachers have their laptops, administrators have their laptops. We need to have a plan in place, um, just in case is if our district assets, expenditure data, payroll data, employee digital files, student records are breached. We need to have a plan in place. And so I'm calling for a planning committee. We know what we know now today, to date, we don't possess a respond and recover cybersecurity standard operating procedure. We just don't have one in place. And we must get one in place. We need a plan in place so that we can then train employees, beginning with IT department, analyzing risk. And currently, the only recourse we have in place is to send out an email blast to all staff when a breach or threat is identified, but no formal training is offered to teachers, counselors, technology specialists, IT technicians, and administrators at these 5 sites. We just don't have any training in place because we don't have a plan in place. So, last but not least, let's get a plan in place today. By the end of the day or by the end of the week is our goal. Let's get the people in place so that we can start building a response and recovery plan. Thank you very much, and I will be sharing this presentation with you shortly.